Mike Owens here. Today I'm joined by Jon Anik, the voice of the Octagon. John, always a pleasure, my man. How are things with you today?
Mike, good to see and hear you again, brother. How are you?
I'm very well. All the better for getting some of your time and to know that in about 2 weeks' time you'll be over on our shores getting ready for UFC 304 in Manchester. How are your emotions ahead of a UK return?
I'll be jonesing to get there, especially with a couple of weeks off on the front end. If I can't be prepared for this one, Mike, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, I mean, you and I have discussed this in the past. I haven't had a lot of opportunities to call fights in the UK over the last decade. So that only serves to heighten my enthusiasm. It's a very special and unique atmosphere to call mixed martial arts fights because the people really care. We also have this variable that the main event is probably going to be happening at 5:30 a.m. Manchester time. So that's unique, but always excited to see what these first time undisputed title challengers can do with these opportunities, because you really do change your life forever, not just financially, but all the ramifications and the positives that come with being able to forever brand yourself an undisputed UFC champion. So that's in front of Belal Muhammad. I think Leon Edwards is a really tough matchup for him. He doesn't seem to agree. We'll see what happens in late July.
I have to ask because you brought it up there. It's obviously we had UFC 204 exactly 100 events ago, very similar situation. But what do you make of the US pay-per-view start time? And can I ask as well, does that change anything in terms of your preparation or in terms of your role on the night?
Well, it's interesting. So Michael Chiesa recently had a chance to call some fights for Road to UFC, that tournament. And I think he was calling fights at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, Vegas time. And, that means your call time might be 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And, we talked a little bit about how the judgment of that work might be relative to what time those fights took place. And I said, let me stop you right there, brother. And by the way, I believe in Chiesa wholeheartedly. I think he's our next great commentator, but nobody gives a shit what time you're calling fights or what time you're competing, right? The athletes are acutely aware of that. The commentators should be, right? I've called fights in Australia and Abu Dhabi and all over the world at unique times in UFC apexes that are empty, in front of 50,000 plus in Melbourne. You got to be ready to go in the middle of the night. So for me, maybe it'll affect my sleep schedule a little bit, but it doesn't affect the preparation.
So I caught up with Arnold Allen a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he thinks it's an advantage for the US fighters, US-based fighters, because they can keep on a similar rhythm, so similar time zone, and kind of almost try and come in as late as possible and keep that time zone. I then about 3 days later caught up with Giga Chikadze, who said, "Yeah, but I'm the one who's got to travel, so it's one and the same." So my question to you is, do you think it is in fact an advantage to the US-based athletes?
Well, it's a great question. Hopefully we get a fighter meeting with Arnold Allen. I would always say that to not have to travel is the best, right? Especially when you're talking about going from Vegas to Manchester or Chicago to Manchester, even though there is a direct flight. So we'll see what Arnie has to say about that in a couple Thursdays in our fighter meeting. But it is a unique thing, I would think, for a lot of the athletes. I know Belal Muhammad at least has suggested that he's gonna try to stay on US time and as such maybe go over there late. I'm not a performance coach, I'm not a nutrition guy. I know he has the best in the corner as far as that's concerned with Sheffy and Larios, but certainly if it were me, and I was, say, a manager, I'd be like, dude, I think you should fucking get your ass over there and not go late. But I believe his plan of attack is to go late. We'll see.
Adam, I've got some great news for you.
What's up, Jesse? Tell me the news.
Inside Fighting has partnered up with DraftKings.
Shut up. But both of us? What do we get out of it?
Well, we don't get anything, but the people out there, they do. Because right now, if they're a new DraftKings customer, all they have to do is go download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, bet $5 on literally any bet, on anything they want on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and they get $150 in bonus bets instantly with promo code Inside Fighting.
I have to ask, obviously, Belal, and I know Belal's a good friend of yours. I know that he's co-host of your brother's podcast. So how does it feel, given all that Belal has had to go through in terms of this win streak, and to a certain extent being in some ways denied the opportunity that he deserves? How happy are you to see your good friend Belal Muhammad in this world title opportunity?
I appreciate the way you phrased the question. I'm thrilled for him as a human being. Such a philanthropic guy and just a good man who wants to help people. And I think a lot of people in the public eye are perpetually misunderstood. And he's certainly not on that Robert Whittaker, Dustin Poirier list of the UFC's most beloved fighters. But sometimes that can come with time and can come with championships and title defenses. Richly deserving and earning of the opportunity, as you know, Mike Owens doesn't even begin to describe it. So I don't know how much we need to dive into that. I mean, he certainly has made himself impossible to deny. And even if they needed to headline UFC 300 with Leon Edwards against a quote unquote bigger name like Shavkat Rakhmonov or somebody who maybe might move some sort of needle more than Belal was going to get this opportunity, even though I think that's hard for a lot of people to digest. So hugely happy for him. I would imagine there are going to be a lot of different emotions for a lot of different people, including him when he hits that tunnel. And thankfully for me, I'm the guy who has a Leon Edwards call, that I'm known for, right? When maybe other people were doubting him, right? So, I feel a lot of emotions in the fight. As you know, I think Leon's the hardest matchup for Belal in the division. He does not agree. And, we'll see what happens. I feel like I've sort of, I've had to do things maybe and say things that upset Belal while simultaneously supporting him like I do the other hundreds of athletes on the roster, right? Like I was watching film of his last loss against Jeff Neal the other day in 2019, and it shows Belal in the corner all bloodied up. I'm sure he doesn't appreciate that, but it's all love for all these athletes. And hopefully I've established enough goodwill on both sides that people know where I stand. But yeah, dude, I'm so excited for Belal. And any athlete that's been through what he's been through, who has bided his time and waited and earned and realized the opportunity.
Is it do you anticipate it to be a difficult needle that you have to thread? Because obviously, and of course, you're extremely respectful towards Leon, and I don't mean this question disrespectfully, but I know that your relationship that you and Belal have, and I imagine if it was me in a similar position with the likes of Calvin Cater or Rob Font, who I spend a lot of time with, it would be a difficult position to occupy. So do you anticipate it's going to be in some ways challenging on fight night?
No, I feel like once the athlete hits the tunnel, any of those type of feelings or emotions go away. As I've said repeatedly, Dominic Cruz is probably the guy I'm closest to. I mean, Belal obviously is right there on his heels, as are other athletes. You establish a lot of interpersonal relationships and you can't help that, but it certainly doesn't affect the call. I mean, I can assure you and everybody else, if Leon Edwards head kicks Belal Muhammad into oblivion, my call is going to reflect that. And there was nothing hard about me screaming with veins popping out of my mouth, Stipe exacts his revenge, even though he did it against Daniel Cormier, So, a lot of people think that was like, my most enthusiastic call ever. And it came against my friend DC, and I certainly wasn't celebrating his demise. So I feel like I have established enough goodwill with Leon, and I'm so focused on everything that comes with calling a pay-per-view and calling a singular mixed martial arts fight that any sort of personal friendship with Belal or his connective tissue with my twin brother and my family is well in the rearview mirror,
100%. This is obviously a rematch from a fight that didn't last too long, and probably not as long as most people wanted or expected. Who do you think takes the advantage from the first meeting going into this rematch?
It's hard not to toss it out completely. It was a short notice circumstance really for both athletes, but Leon was to face Khamzat Chimaev one of the 3 times that those 2 individuals were scheduled to have fought. And Belal was the guy who stepped up, and obviously he showed a lot of heart and toughness when he did have compromising spots in that fight. One of the hardest eye pokes, I think, to watch back just in terms of seeing the combination of a human being's physical and emotional pain, because Belal was not wrong in thinking that when that opportunity against Leon went away with an eye poke, that it was going to be hard to come by again. But they're just different athletes at this point in time. So I know they've both leveled up. Leon's leveling up maybe has been easier for someone like me with a more amateur eye to see, but I give him a lot of credit for certainly those 2 wins over Usman, even if you didn't like the bulk of the first one, and then the win over Colby Covington. And Belal's strength of schedule has been phenomenal. He was on 1 foot against Gilbert Burns. He's had a lot of less than ideal circumstances. So I truly don't know. It's been fascinating to watch the betting line sort of waffle. Leon's minus 205, at least on the American odds front right now, about a 2-to-1 favorite. But yes, I'm fascinated to see it, but largely I have to throw out most of the first fight. Even though Leon had more success, I think Belal's a totally different physical animal than he was, and I think Leon is 25% better than he was.
Can you draw a parallel from Belal's situation coming up to this fight in 304 and Leon's title fight opportunity in terms of the long winning streak being denied for so long, a dominant champion in both respects, like a guy who maybe wasn't particularly, dare I say, adored by the fans? There is a lot of similar parallels despite them being such different individuals.
Yeah, I'm glad we spoke because I can probably work this into the pay-per-view somehow, some way. I mean, you might have just written my pay-per-view open for me here as we sit here on July 9th. So thank you for that. Yeah, you made the parallel for me, honestly. And I believe the record would show that I was screaming from the rooftops for Leon Edwards to get his championship opportunity, just like I'm screaming for Sean Strickland right now to wait for his opportunity, right? Close fight, championship loss, not afforded an immediate rematch like a lot of athletes are. Fought Paulo Costa, right? Like I certainly believe that Leon Edwards was overdue when his moment finally arrived, and the same can be said for Belal Muhammad, So I just think this is really what it's all about because they really are the best two welterweights in the world, I think, right now. And uniquely, there are 4 welterweights behind them. If I can name them, hopefully right now on the spot, Sean Brady, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Ian Machado, Gary, and Jack Della Maddalena, who all are right there. And I could sort of shout about their championship worth right now as well. So it's a great time to be alive if you're a welterweight. And if Belal Muhammad does win the belt, I think there will be promotional pressure to defend it in short order in a trilogy with Leon or against one of those other guys that I mentioned. And I think one of the best upsides to a Belal win promotionally would be that he would get right back on the horse.
Yeah. No, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I want to move us towards the co-main event. Tom Aspinall again in a rematch against Curtis Blaydes. Given the situation with Jon Jones seemingly defending his full heavyweight title against Stipe Miocic, do you feel like this is the right next move for Tom Aspinall to keep active and to defend an interim title?
Yeah, so Israel Adesanya has only ever taken issue with me for anything, and it's to suggest that his interim championship against Kelvin Gastelum, didn't count as an undisputed title win, right? Because or the follow-up fight against Robert Whittaker, right? That should be a title defense. And interim championships are a very powerful thing in my mind, even if maybe in the past I've said the belt should be silver. I consider there to be 2 undisputed UFC heavyweight champions right now. And Tom Aspinall is one of them. So he's defending his undisputed title as far as I'm concerned. And for those that have the archaic philosophy, maybe that a champion is not really the champion, and it's my opinion that it's archaic, but if a champion doesn't defend their belt at least one time, then they are not the champion. I mean, Alex Pineda never defended his UFC middleweight champion. Nobody would dispute that he wasn't the middleweight king. But if Tom Aspinall defends the interim championship, as far as I'm concerned, that is an undisputed championship title defense. As for the first fight's relative value to the second one, I mean, Curtis Blaydes, he's got big, powerful hands, and he looked pretty sharp early on. Sometimes these heavyweight fights really come down to who looks sharp early on. But when Michael Bisping suggests that not only is Tom Aspinall the best, most skilled heavyweight in the world right now, with the most potential long-term to be the greatest heavyweight of all time, I'm not far behind him, right? And it's not because those guys are boys, right? It's because a lot of us look at Aspinall on film and we're like, my goodness, what couldn't this guy do athletically? So, and he's got submissions, right? He's got chokes. So, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, man. Like Stipe Miocic last competed when he was 38. He's going to fight Jon Jones, God willing, November 9th or whatever it is when he's 42. And, hopefully out of respect to competition in the sport, whoever wins that fight, vacates, or defends against Tommy or Curtis in short order.
How confident are you that the winner of the interim title fight later this month and the winner of the presumed full title fight between Jones and Miocic, how confident are you that that fight gets made next?
Oh, it's a strange sport, right? I mean, I know Joe Rogan masterfully laid a foundation for Alex Pineda to move into the heavyweight division right now. And far be it from me to doubt his any move or his any goal. But I think for a lot of us purists, right, who are rooted in a meritocracy, there's all this unfinished business and noise in this heavyweight bracket that sort of needs to be sorted out independent of this otherworldly light heavyweight champion. So yes, that is my hope. But you know, I say a lot of things that people think are crazy, right? Like I felt like Belal eventually was going to get his opportunity and the UFC would do right by him. You know, I've said, I think that once Conor comes back, you know, unless something catastrophic happens against Michael Chandler, you could see him twice in 8 months, and people think I'm crazy or, you know, chasing headlines or something. You know, when I suggest Dustin Poirier should fight Nathan Diaz. So, you know, I say a lot of things and I believe a lot of them, and, you know, we'll see what happens. But yes, I do believe, that if Stipe wins, he would probably go off into the sunset. If Jon wins, what better way to go out than to fight Tom Aspinall, that a lot of people think is the boogeyman, you know? And if anybody will prove that he's willing to do what he's done his whole career, take on legends and the best in the world, it would be Jon Jones fighting Tom Aspinall and potentially beating him on the way out.
Can I ask you, John, and I'm not sure if you've either been asked this question before or talked about this on your podcast, but we've obviously just seen the last pay-per-view, UFC 303, and Alex Pereira's second round knockout of Yuri Prochazka really begs the question of who's number one pound for pound, and we seem to be seeing this debate kind of resurface in the sport. So my question to you is, who is number one pound for pound in your eyes, and what does being number one pound for pound entail for you?
Well, if activity is part of it, then Jon Jones can't lead the conversation. Jon Jones is the greatest mixed martial arts athlete that I've ever seen. And his performance against Cyril Gane, however long ago, did nothing to diminish his value. It only served to elevate his stock on the back end of whatever training camp he had, right? So I understand why people want to lead the conversation with Jon Jones, but for me, it's Islam Makhachev every day of the week. And even if you look at his last performance, his ability to find that takedown and that submission in round 5 of an undisputed championship fight that maybe didn't hang in the balance, but you just don't know. All hail Islam Makhachev. And I do sort of lean into lightweights and welterweights when I do talk about pound for pound types, those divisions that are, you know, 18 deep. So Islam Makhachev is the pound for pound king. Jon Jones is the greatest mixed martial arts athlete of all time with respect to Georges St. Pierre and everybody else. And I'm just one fan with but one opinion.
Well, that segues very nicely into my next question, because the featured fight features lightweights, so Islam's division. We have a guy who talks very similar to me, and Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, facing off against Bobby, or formerly Bobby Green, but now King Green. How much fun, both in terms of the build-up, the press conferences and their interactions, and also the fight, do you anticipate this fight to be? Because to me, it's like a match made in heaven.
Bro, it's unbelievable. And I really think that what Bobby Green, or King Green, I should say, has done at this stage of his career is insane. His speed is still, I mean, I don't know if he's getting faster. I don't know, Mike, if that's possible, but it looks like he might be getting faster. And I think Paddy Pimblett, because of circumstances competitively in his career, and yes, I'm starting with the mixed martial arts, he's underrated as both grappler and striker, right? And, you know, yeah, people don't always want to back the guy who isn't necessarily in the gym training 24/7, 365, and maybe they don't want to back the guy who likes to enjoy his life and has some work-life balance a little bit. But I am higher on Paddy Pimblett than I think a lot of my contemporaries are. So competitively, I can't wait to see the fight. It's hard for me to get Bobby Green's performance against Jim Miller out of my head. I mean, he just looked phenomenal, just doling out damage with quickness and accuracy and volume. My goodness, man. So definitely, you know, buying Bobby Green's stock at whatever stage or age, and the buildup figures to be insane. You know, one thing that I like about Paddy Pimblett is the quick wit that comes naturally. You know, he's not looking for people to write his material in advance. And I think the same can be said for Bobby. So yeah, they're going to shine with microphones and they'll shine under the lights as part of this massive pay-per-view.
That's not a Paddy thing, John. That's a Scouse thing. That's kind of the way we are. We're quite naturally quick-witted people. What, in your opinion, makes you rate Paddy more than maybe the consensus? Because you said then you kind of rate him very, very highly. Why do you think that is?
Well, I guess I've just seen him grapple, you know, and I've seen a lot of the film that predates his UFC career. And, you know, I know there were some circumstances health-wise surrounding not just the Jared Gordon training camp, but some of the circumstances of that fight. You know, Jared Gordon realizing success in that fight that compromised Paddy to whatever degree. But it's the same thing with Ian Machado Gary. I just think I am focused more on the skills and less on the bravado. And I'm not trying to put undue pressure on Paddy. I certainly think that, you know, fewer Twinkies and more training sessions as a champion in the future would serve him well. But everybody has a different path, you know, and I'm sure John Jones has had a lot of Twinkies and has had a lot of training camps without Twinkies, and he's won all of those fights. So
as you look down the rest of this card, is the one other fight that's maybe tickling your fancy? One other fight that jumps off the screen to you that you want to discuss?
God, I don't even have the card in front of me. I know Oban Elliott is competing, if I'm not mistaken. Is he scheduled to compete?
The Welsh gangster.
What's the pay-per-view main card opener? What do they have in that slot?
Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze, and then
Yeah, so
Makhachev.
oftentimes I'll peel back the curtain a little bit. I mentioned the Arnold Allen fighter meeting earlier. So our producer, Zach Candido, will send me a list of the fighters we're scheduled to have meetings with. And a lot goes into it. They have history as to how many times we've sat down with these athletes, how many times we haven't sat down with certain athletes. And we can't sit down with all 28 athletes. So we usually sit down with 14 or 15. And we sat down with Arnold Allen, I think, before his last 2 fights, but I haven't called the bulk of his career if you look at the history. So Arnold was not on the list, and I asked to have him on the list. So I guess, yeah, that's the fight that I would bring up because, yeah, I mean, on that short list of the top 10 fighters who have never fought for an undisputed championship is Arnold Allen. And, you know, Giga's always really competitive and fun to watch and, you know, always looking to prove his elite status as well. So I'm excited, man. You know, all the pay-per-views feel big, but this one feels especially so for a number of different factors. What else we got? Who's Oban Elliott fighting? Talk to me. I mean, I know
Oban Elliott's fighting Preston Parsons. We have Meatball Molly McCann. We have Nathaniel Wood versus Daniel Pineda. Sam Patterson's on there. Modestas Bukauskas is on there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I'm excited. I could get excited about all of those guys. I'm glad that Sam is back to untracked, you know. And I'm always a Modestas Bukauskas fan. I mean, my God, this guy, the circumstances that he's dealt with. I got some Lithuanian blood as well, so that's part of it, you know. But yeah, no, it's exciting. Like I get more excited than not to call fights at weird times too. I guess I would rather like first thing in the morning in Australia than getting off the air at 6 a.m. like this. But you know, if you don't think and respect to every fan that obviously does this on a regular basis and tries to evolve their social life and their marriage and their children around this passion and recreation, you know, but if you don't think for me, the adrenaline as a fan / commentator is going to carry me through this without caffeine. I mean, you know, yeah, just excited to be in the belly of the beast.
I love it. The last one from me, John. We've got a couple of minutes and I always appreciate your time. Let's move from present to future. Is the one fight that's not currently booked that's jumping off the screen to you is this kind of your must-see fight for the second half of 2024?
Yeah, I mean, there are injuries surrounding certain contenders like Amir Al-Bazzi at flyweight, right? I'm certainly of an competitive nature for Steve Erceg to fight Alexandre Pantoja again. But it's back to this welterweight division. And I don't know, log jams can be a good thing. Sometimes I don't know how the promotion wants to go about clearing them up, so to speak. Ian Machado Gary versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, 2 undefeated fighters. Do they want to try to preserve those O's before those guys get to a championship setting? Certainly not with Ian Machado Gary. If you're giving him Michael fucking Venom Page, that's a really hard matchup, you know? So if you were trying to preserve any sort of O or give a guy a strategic path to a championship fight with that 0 intact, they certainly haven't done that with Ian. So I go Ian Machado Gary and Shavkat Rakhmonov if both are healthy and willing. And yeah, I mean, that's the dream fight for me. And certainly Tatiana Suarez fighting for a world title sooner rather than later.
I love it. We've come full circle. We started talking about the welterweight title and we've ended talking about some welterweight contenders. So best place for us to end. John, always a place to get your time. It really is. And I hope if speaking to me for 25 minutes has helped you write a little bit of your broadcast speaks, then hopefully it was worth it, is all I can say.
I'm right when we get off the air, I'm going to go do a deep dive now on Leon Edwards' path and to see, you know, where he was at certain points when maybe he was denied or needed that extra win that he shouldn't have had to produce, and yet he did. So thank you for that. Appreciate your time as well, buddy. We'll do it again.